Hey ladies, welcome back. This is Case Briefs with Megan. Let's make this case brief. If it's not apparent, I live in the United States, and maybe if you live under a rock, you are not aware. But currently, there are some rights that people have in terms of marriages and families, and the right to be able to control what happens to your own body that are kind of up in the air right now. And a lot of those cases come from family law. So I figure it might be a good idea to go over some family law cases, starting with this one, Loving versus Virginia. Keep in mind that this case actually isn't too old and was just argued in the late 60s. So this case is, a little over 50 years old, but the message that it brings to the table still rings true. It all starts with a man named Richard, who is a white man, and Mildred, who is a person of color. As we know, love is mysterious, but Richard and Mildred fall in love, and they want to get married. However, Richard and Mildred live in Virginia, and in Virginia and in a couple different states in the United States, interracial marriages were deemed illegal. They did the next best thing. They got married outside of Virginia, and they actually went and got married in DC and then returned to their home in Virginia. However, a couple weeks after they returned home to Virginia, Richard and Mildred are actually arrested because they're accused of violating Virginia's Racial Integrity Act, which is an old Jim Crow law that still happened to be in place even though the town that they lived in was well known for being a mixed race community. Richard and Mildred knew what they'd be going up against when they returned to Virginia. They had their marriage license up on the wall, and they showed the police officers when they came in to arrest the couple and said, "No, we're married. See, we were married in DC, therefore our marriage is valid." The police officers then proceeded to say, "Not in Virginia," and arrested them. Courts gave Mildred and Richard, who at this point were now heavily pregnant and had a child on the way, two options. They could either go to jail for 1 to 5 years, or they could go to jail for 1 year, and then they would have to leave the state of Virginia and their families that were in Virginia for the next 25 years. They would not be allowed back in the state. Of course, if you only have to spend a year in jail and you've got some kids to take care of, they took the 1 year in jail and then they moved out of Virginia to DC. Of course, Mildred and Richard are frustrated. They want to see their families. They don't want to have to wait another 25 years. So they end up filing in the state of New York saying that Virginia is violating the Equal Protection Clause by having this sort of Jim Crow law in place, the Racial Integrity Act, saying that you cannot prohibit somebody from marrying another on the basis of their race. Of course, if you live here in the United States and you maybe don't live under a rock, you would know that Loving versus Virginia, the courts rule in favor of the Loving, saying that yes, Virginia had violated the 14th Amendment, and you are not allowed to be discriminated based on if you decide to marry somebody outside of your race. Essentially, interracial marriage is legal. We apparently needed a law that says that. Virginia had tried to argue that this is totally fair because they applied to both black and white people. However, that doesn't make sense. You are still restricting somebody's ability to choose who they love, to choose who they want to marry on the basis of their race, which inherently is not rational. Actually, the courts looked at these acts and they said, okay, if we're going to be a free country where people are free to make decisions, restricting somebody's ability to marry another based on race is stupid for a free people. Therefore, we're not going to say that you can't marry somebody outside of your race. The courts ultimately say the inherent right to choose who you marry or not marry rests with the individual. It does not rest with the state. So therefore, interracial marriage, a-okay. And ultimately, the Lovings end up staying together, married happily until Richard unfortunately passes away some years later. But the matter of the fact stands is that this is the case that paved the way for you to be able to marry somebody that is outside of your race. And it's important that we remember those things in a time like now. If you feel like doing a little bit more research, there is a movie that came out in 2016. It's called Loving. It's a great little way to just get a little bit more of an insight into this particular case. Also, it's just really cool. If you take away anything from this case, love is patient, love is kind, and loving is loving.